those who are here on time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar for our F&M students and their families with the members of PORT. My name is Kelsey Lee Hepler. I am a proud alumna of the class of 2016, and I love F&M so much that I just never left. I currently work in the Office of the President, and I'm also serving as a member of our Pandemic Operations Response Team, otherwise known as PORT. Before we begin, I would like to start with a few housekeeping details. You'll note that all of our attendees are muted with their cameras off. We are recording this session and we'll share it in our PORT weekly report next Tuesday. So if you need to hop off, we will be sharing it at that time so you can come back and watch it later. We've invited attendees to submit questions in advance using a form sent as part of the invitation. And we're going to be using those submitted questions for our Q&A period later in the webinar. And we'll put that Q&A submission link in the chat as well so you can access it throughout the webinar. We're also fortunate to have an ASL interpreter with us for those who would benefit from that service. Thank you, Libby. As the invitation said, the goal of this webinar is to just take a moment to reflect on the successes and the challenges of the fall term thus far, and to discuss the college's planning for winter break, spring 2021 and beyond. Our main panelists today are President Barbara Altman, Deb Moriarty, Interim Vice President and Dean of Student Affairs, Donna Flum, Director of Alumni and Volunteer Engagement and PORT Chair, Amelia Rouser, Associate Dean of the Faculty and Professor of Art History, Alan Caniglia, Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, and Dr. Rich Keeling, Chairman and Senior Executive Consultant of Keeling and Associates. The other members of PORT are also here today to help answer any questions. They include Mike Wetzel, Associate Vice President for Facilities Management and Campus Planning, and Pierce Buller, Vice President and General Counsel. We're also joined by Eric Narberg and Alex Vasquez, our consultants from Keeling and Associates. Now I'm pleased to ask President Barbara Altman to say a few words of welcome and begin our program.
Thank you, Kelsey Lee. I'm so pleased to be here with you all, and the attendance keeps rising. This is a great turnout, and it's not quite the same as having you in the same room, but it's a way we can talk to a lot of you at once. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kelsey Lee, for that introduction.
Hey, sorry, I'm just babysitting, so I can talk.
Josh, I think we need to mute if you wouldn't mind. Thanks. And I also wanted to thank Libby Berlin for being our interpreter today, and all of my colleagues for being here to speak to their respective areas of expertise. So what I'd like to say is, first of all, it is a joyous thing simply to be with you well into week 2 of module 2. That in itself is a huge triumph. We are one of the small percentage of schools that opened in person, are teaching with in-person components, have not had to make a radical shift or lock down the campus at any point so far. And I'm really, really happy to say that at the moment, there are no active cases of COVID on campus. This week's testing has just come back with no positives, either in the employee pool or in the student pool. And so we are on a roll. It's been a good 10 days or so since we had a positive test. We're doing extremely well. Total, there have been 17 new cases since we started testing in the middle of August. It is 19 with a couple of what used to be called false positives, which were tests that showed residual presence of COVID in the DNA or in the biological sample of someone who had already been sick. So 17 cases total since the middle of August. We're really proud of our track record, and we're really, really proud of our students for the way they have risen to the challenge. This is pretty remarkable. This is F&M at its best. Students, families, thank you for really honoring and taking to heart that pledge. Students in particular, I see you with your masks on. It brings joy to my heart every time I see you on campus, in the park, in the neighborhood, at the local restaurants where you are behaving with the most exemplary of conduct. I think we are setting a good example for many of our neighbors and families. Thank you for supporting your students in doing this. Thank you for supporting those who are here on campus with us. And thank you for supporting those who are studying remotely, who are having to negotiate their own challenges of home life and schoolwork at the same time. So all in all, this has brought out the best in by far the greatest majority of people. And I'm really grateful to you. I think this is, as I said, this is F&M at its best, and we will keep it up. I want to say a couple of more things that I know may be of real interest to you. I've seen the questions that have come in, and I want to get out in front of some of them by making the following remarks. First of all, you know that every single communication we have sent you, whether written or in person like this, has said that this works only if we are responsive to the information we are getting and the circumstances surrounding us at any given moment. So there will always have to be changes as we modify to take into account what is going on campus and what is happening locally and nationally. There is no way to set a policy that will get us through to the end of the year without modifying it. We are simply we're part of the world, and the world influences how we work. And so we're always assessing our success and deciding whether there's anything we need to do differently. That was behind our change in testing protocols. As you will know from our updates, we are now testing a third of the student population every week, so that every student is tested at least twice throughout one of the modules. We have a plan for exit testing, which is that the third group of students who would regularly be up for surveillance testing will be tested at the beginning of the week before classes end, but we will also make additional spots available to other students from groups A and B who want to be tested before they go home. We will also continue to communicate with our students about the availability of a student wellness center if they are showing any symptoms. If they're symptomatic, they should immediately go to the wellness center. And we should also remind students that if and before they go home, they will want to perhaps quarantine to some degree, just to make sure that they are not at all symptomatic before they leave our campus. We have a responsibility to all of you. We have a responsibility to all the parts of the country and all the other countries to which our students are going home. And we do not want to let you leave campus with any chance that you have COVID. So students, we will ask you to be really responsible and take advantage of those slots that are available for testing. So testing is one of the things that we have modified as we went through the term, based on the results we were getting and how well things were working. Another thing that we are constantly assessing is whether there is any option for us to bring back a few more students or considerably more students in the spring. Let me say very clearly, I'm going to repeat this several times, at the moment, our principle and our plan is still to do what we declared, which is to have the sophomores back and to have the first years study remotely. However, as of this week, we are taking into account all of the factors, everything that has worked well, everything we can begin to foresee for the spring, all the many questions that are still open for the spring, and we are beginning to think very carefully about if there's any way for us to bring some of the first years back as well. We don't know yet. I don't want to give you false hope, but I do want to tell you that we're thinking it through very carefully, and we will look at it from every angle, because the reason this is working so well right now is because of the way we have done the de-densification and the testing in the fall. We don't want to jeopardize that. If we go too far and bring too many people back, we're back to square one, and we actually jeopardize the opportunity for all students to remain on campus for the spring. And we risk bringing a peak of infection to not only campus, but to Lancaster. So we need to continue to be very prudent, but I want you to hear now that we are looking at this from every possible angle to see if we can make changes. And if we do, we will inform you immediately. So that's one thing that I want you to hear now. There are many questions, especially from the families of student athletes, about isn't it possible to bring the athletes back? Well, we'll keep you posted on that, and we are thinking it through. I imagine it would not just be athletes. We will have to figure out an equitable way to allow more students back if that happens at all. So please know that we are thinking about it. Most of today has been that discussion of one sort or another, and we will continue to hash it out and act responsibly. Please take pleasure in the fact that we're doing so well, and know that we will always work in the best interests of our students and employees and our neighbors. That has to continue to be the bedrock on which we plan for the spring. One other thing that I want to say, and every president is saying this to every college and university community: sophomores, when you come back, you cannot party. You cannot. That is also what will put us in jeopardy. You can't plan to come here and immediately gather with your dear friends whom you haven't seen since March and figure that you're going to be able to get away with partying here or in campus approved housing around the periphery of the college or off campus. You just can't do it. You're going to have to bring yourself to abide by the same standards that everybody on campus now has upheld, because that's the only way this works. So I'm saying this to you now in October. We'll say it to you in November. We'll say it to you in December and in January, so that this is fully ingrained by the time you get back to us for a February 1 start for Module 3, okay? We are so eager to have you back. We love you dearly. We're reaching out to you in a million different ways right now to make sure that you can benefit from everything going on here. But please be sure that you are going to have to adhere very strictly to the principles of that pledge when you get here. Otherwise, this doesn't work. So there you go. I've done my duty, and now we'll turn to more interesting updates. But just be clear that this is working because we're doing this so well with all of the safety and health protocols in place. And I'm so grateful to everybody for stepping up in unusual times and really bringing their higher selves to the campus, to the table, to remote learning, and to all of the different ways we've had to learn to work. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it off to Vice President Deb Moriarty in Student Affairs.
Thank you, President Altman. I wish I could just say ditto to everything that our fearless leader just said. I would mention that we have our pandemic operations response team that is a senior level group that meets minimum of 4 times a week to continue to review the data, look at our protocols, determine testing, all of the little details that go into this. And I also want to give a big shout out to our students. I think that while we have great protocols, the reason it's working is because our students have been absolutely phenomenal. They care as much as we do about the safety of themselves, their friends, the campus community, and their families. The questions that they're asking about returning home for Thanksgiving have been really heartwarming in terms of them wanting to make sure that they're leaving here healthy, so that they're not creating any additional concerns once they get back home. So nothing's ever perfect, right? We haven't perfected this. If there was a perfect model, then every campus in this country would be using it, but there's not, and we're constantly tweaking and addressing and adjusting. And while it might seem very rigid to some, I would say that the schools that haven't been rigid in their protocols are the ones that are seeing spikes in cases and students quarantined for the whole campus or students being sent home. So we are really proud of our students and the fact that we have a protocol in place. We knock on wood every time we say this, but it seems to be working for F&M at this particular point in time. You know, we really are listening carefully. We're getting lots of feedback, lots of questions, lots of input. Not only from our own campus community, but from outside of the campus community, and we've been responsive. One of the concerns on campus was about our communication, and within a week we had completely changed our communication plan, and that was really well received by the community. So our goal is to be as transparent and communicative as we can be, knowing that things can change on a moment's notice. I want to reiterate President Altman's call to not be complacent. And sophomores, you're not going to want to hear this because you're so excited about coming back, but we cannot be complacent. The reason that we are where we're at is because these first-year students did a phenomenal job of following the protocol. And I will tell you that we were quite severe on the students who didn't follow the protocol at the beginning of this semester and sent home approximately 20 students who did decide that they were here to party and that they thought it was safe to do. So we're very serious about the pledge. The sophomores will be signing the pledge, reading and signing the pledge when they return, and we will hold you to those standards. Finally, I want to say, I felt like semester started off a little slow in terms of programming because it's such a job to move everybody in. But I think that what I've seen the second half, or really after the second week and throughout this module, is that our student leaders have really stepped up to offer programs, both on campus as well as for our remote students. We did that sophomore year experience that many of you all of you who are sophomores were invited to participate in. Our goal is to have a similar plan for our first year students who are going to be moving and studying remotely. We want to have you meet your basic needs. We want to keep you engaged. We want to continue the leadership development and personal development that is a big part of being a student here. And so you can look forward to having multiple opportunities to participate, and whether you're studying remotely or on campus. I think students have really done a great job of planning programs with social distancing, with masks that have been really fun events for students on campus. I said that was finally, but the last thing I'm going to say is, we're in this together. So take care of yourself. It seems complicated for some, but it's as simple as wearing a mask, washing your hands, and socially distancing. And those 3 simple guidelines help tremendously in preventing the spread of this horrendous pandemic. I do know there are juniors and seniors on here, so I forgive me if I mostly focused on first and second year students. That seems like that's where most of the questions have come from, but we'll address whatever other issues there are. And with that, I would like to introduce Dean Amelia Rouser from Academic Affairs.
Hi, everybody. I just want to talk a little bit about the academic side of what we've been doing this fall. As everybody knows, we made 2 huge changes in order to be pandemic ready this fall. One was that we went to a blended learning model with the pledge that all of our courses would be available to all of our students, no matter where they were, whether they were studying remotely, whether they were in Lancaster, or even whether they were around the world. And second, that we changed the academic calendar. So we are teaching on a module system this year. And the reason that we made that change was because we saw how difficult it was to manage 4 courses simultaneously when we were all online last March and April. It was a lot to manage. It was a lot to keep track of. And we're all distracted and burdened psychologically just by living through this challenging time. So the faculty felt that by limiting the number of things we were doing at one time and cutting the semester in half into modules, that would be a way that we could stay focused, get our work done together, spend more time with a faculty member would have more time with a single group of students, seeing them almost every day during the module, to keep that close faculty-student interaction that's such a hallmark of an F&M education, and be able to maintain our goals and our standards together in the midst of this pandemic. So we made those 2 big changes. It was a huge job for faculty to retrain over the summer to get ready to offer blended learning in the module system. They worked extremely hard, and we've just now concluded the first module, which was very successful by all measures. We're still learning how to manage all these things, of course. Not everything's perfect. Faculty are learning how to manage all their cameras coming from different parts, the ones that show the back of their head and the ones that show their students remotely, how they can hear their students who are in the room, as well as the ones who are joining maybe from around the world. We're still working on all those things, but both faculty and students have said how important it is that we're together, that we're learning together, we're working together, whether we're meeting over Zoom like this or in a room together. So I think we feel really proud of everything we've accomplished so far, and just so thrilled that we're able to keep doing this. We're able to keep doing what is at the core of our mission, which is teaching and learning together. I want to address one question that has come up in advance on some of the questions, which is, when are we going to hear about the courses for the spring? And the good news about that is the courses will be, the course schedule will be released on Monday. And students are going to be able to register for JTerm and modules 3 and 4 all at once. And registration will begin November 9th. So courses will be released. Then we have a 2-week period of advisement. Students can look at their schedules, consult with their advisors, and then we'll go through registration as we normally do. What's unusual, of course, is that this year we have not only the modules, but a JTerm, which is sort of modeled on summer school in that it's a very intense period. Students may take one course during the JTerm, and all of JTerm courses will be online only. Whereas in modules 3 and 4, there will be a mix of in-person and online courses. And I look forward to answering any more of your questions later in the program. Thank you.
So greetings, I'm Rich Keeling. I come from Keeling and Associates, I'm chairman of that company, and we are the health and well-being consultants for Franklin and Marshall. Have been working with the college ever since sometime in May to make preparations for the health and safety that have enabled us to get through the part of the semester that Dr. Altman described. I would say that what's happened at Franklin and Marshall is amazing. That is, you have defied the headlines. And I'll say more about why I put it that way. And that defying the headlines has taken a great deal of commitment, a great deal of willingness and patience from everyone to make this work. So first, about the headlines that you've defied. You've probably seen the New York Times aggregate studies about the numbers of college students who've been infected with COVID-19, more than 180,000 now. And underneath those headlines is the sad truth that some of those students have become quite ill, some of them are still ill, and a few have died. You've probably also read about members of the faculty and staff and one college president who has died from COVID-19. So the headlines are terrible and the stakes are high. But what's important to say about Franklin and Marshall is how much the extraordinary efforts that faculty, staff, and students have made together have defied those headlines. You are one of a very small proportion of colleges who have successfully used testing strategies, risk mitigation through masks and social distancing to control and contain the spread of COVID-19 on the campus. Even in the past 24 hours, you've read stories perhaps about closures, colleges going back to all remote learning. The College of Worcester did it today. The city of Ann Arbor enforced it on the University of Michigan last night. Things like that have not happened at Franklin and Marshall, and they've not happened because of the very capable policies, very importantly, diligent efforts made by students and others to keep all of us safe. So the effect of that has been that we've done something very different from what's happened in many other colleges and universities. And we've been able to go through a semester from one module, make the transition to the next, and plan for safe exit from the college just before Thanksgiving. All of that puts us in a great position as we think about the spring. And there are lots of decisions, as you've heard already, to make about the spring, but one decision will be consistent, which is the highest priority at Franklin and Marshall will continue to be the health, safety, and well-being of all members of this community. And I'm confident that the leadership of the college, with the assistance from the students, from us as consultants and others, will continue to make that possible. Thank you. It's very good to be with you today. And I think my colleague, Vice President Caniglia, follows me.
Thank you very much, Rich. And hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to talk with you a little bit this afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about the testing strategies that we have employed. Our philosophy, as Dr. Keeling was just indicating, has always been to promote health, safety, and well-being, not only of individuals, but from a public health perspective as well, and to minimize the likelihood of outbreaks. That has been the goal behind our testing strategy, and it has been 100% science-based, keeping track of the evolving literature and knowledge on this. We have a multiple-pronged approach. First, as you know, we have the student pledge. There's a comparable pledge for faculty and professional staff. We reconfigured spaces. We have single rooms for all students that are in residence. We reduced density. We have daily screening for individuals on campus. We have individual testing, entry testing, surveillance testing, now modified universal testing. I will be speaking about those in a little bit more detail in a minute. And then finally, wastewater testing. I wanted to make it clear that wastewater testing is not a substitute for other tests, but rather the employment of an alternative model side by side with individual screening and testing so as to minimize the likelihood of outbreaks. It's a multi-dimensional approach so that we have multiple ways of hunting for evidence of an infection or a problem that is developing. To date, we have conducted over 5,100 individual tests on students, and 0.3%, or if you will, 3 in 1,000 have been positive. We have had a maximum of 7 positive active cases at any one time, and that was only for a couple of days, several weeks ago. The count for the past 12 days has been 0 active cases. As others have said, a lot of the credit for this goes to the behavior and the dedication of our students, as well as faculty and professional staff who have been highly committed to making a residential semester work for us. As you know, in Module 2, we changed our testing strategy to modified universal testing, where every student will get tested once every 3 weeks by being a member of Group A, B, or C. This has some advantages over what we did in module number 1. It actually leads to more students being tested. It leads to more uniform testing, and it lowers the likelihood of a silent infection breeding on campus. As you know, wastewater testing, which we are continuing to do in Module 2, is a technique about which knowledge is less than perfect. We are doing this, not relying on it, but doing this as an experiment because we believe it can be helpful to us as a sentinel approach to locating the possibility of some sort of an outbreak. Sometimes a wastewater test will lead to the need to test at the individual level, sometimes not. For example, this past week, we had a positive test in Ware College House in the wastewater, but it was a very small amount, a trace amount, barely measurable. And because we had previous positives in that house, had tested everybody, found no infections, we decided that quarantine and additional individual testing were unnecessary. In a different situation with a different result, we might go to a different approach in terms of individual testing. We are continually assessing on the basis of the scientific literature. This science-based approach includes staying up to date with new knowledge, as well as new options for various types of testing. It is impossible for me to say with certainty, this is definitely what we will be doing in the future, because new knowledge is being created and new options are available. We also have to be responsive to regulations. In terms of the end of Module 2, members of Group C will test at the beginning of the last week. We are going to offer optional testing for all other students who would like to have a test available before they head home for the break. It will not be mandatory, but it will be opt-in. And so students will be seeing in the next few days a query about that, because we want to make sure that we have adequate testing supplies available. Anybody who wants to test before they go home for themselves, to protect family members, or for any other reason will have the opportunity to get one. My colleague, Associate Vice President for facilities management, Mike Wetzel, is also on the call, and he has done a magnificent job in conjunction with a number of colleagues in being the coordinator, the site coordinator for all of our testing. I wanted to ask Mike if he would like to talk about what it's been like on the ground at the ASFC. And then Mike, after you're finished, I'll just ask you to pass the mic over to the next speaker. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, the success of the project, or the success of our testing, let's say, I think is twofold. One, it was the commitment of the students, but also the commitment of staff. And I wanted to come on to basically thank our staff for all the work that they've done in order to make this happen. But I really want to start by thanking the students. Many of you, if you're on this call and you're seeing who you're talking to right now, have seen me since probably the very beginning of August, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. But as Alan said, there's been 5,100 tests done with students. There's been over 6,000 tests done across campus for faculty and staff also. And to do that, you know, it takes a huge effort. But in order for us to accomplish it, I want to be very clear. I'm very appreciative to each and every student that comes to the ASFC, because it's very clear that, one, I want to thank you for your time, because I know it's an imposition on what you're trying to do on a daily basis. But your cooperation is incredible. One of the things that I really like, what I've seen from day one, and I've seen it up until testing, which we ended yesterday, the respect that each student has for the staff and the process over in the ASFC. It's not a difficult process, but it's a time-consuming process. And it's one where I think some students have been asked maybe to test 3, 4, 5, maybe possibly 6 times. But yes, it's an inconvenience, but it's a necessity. But you come to the ASFC repeatedly with good intentions. You're very polite. You're very respectful of everybody. And I just wanted to start by thanking you for what you've done to make this program successful. Now, on the staff side, I just want to thank them also. A lot of people here don't know that in order for us to do the test, we're testing probably every day. We're on an average 2 times a week right now. We're probably testing 300 individuals on a daily basis. In order for that to happen, it just doesn't happen overnight. You know, it takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of work. And I would be remiss if I did not start by thanking our Student Wellness Center under the direction of Dr. Amy Myers. They're doing a phenomenal job in kind of guiding us through this. Also, we have solicited the help of what a medical testing group called Cross Country. They are RNs, LPNs, and CNAs that come to campus whenever we need them. Right now, we're averaging about 11 participants per testing session. So they're here from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. But one of the biggest pleasures I have is working with our staff here on campus. There are many times, I know many of you on this call don't know what a sign-up genius is, but we have to determine a way of reaching out to our community to try and get help. And sometimes it's very last minute. Sometimes there are times where people have time to think about it. But I'm actually asking a lot of people to give up a lot of their free time to give me 4 hours of their time, maybe in the morning, or 4 hours of their time in the afternoon. And I am very proud to say that every time I send out one of these signups, probably within an hour or an hour and a half, I have had the success of having the campus community come and be very, very willing to work with me and work with the students and work with staff here on campus. So again, I'll conclude by saying I want to really thank the students and I want to thank the staff. And in order for this to be successful, it needs to be a team effort. So now I want to hand it over to Donna Flum, who is the chair of PORT.
Mike, thank you. Some wonderful words there. I'm going to start by echoing much of what has been said this evening and start by thanking all of you, our community. And it starts with students, its parents, faculty, and staff. An extraordinary thing is happening here at F&M. We are keeping each other safe. We are diligent. We're being smart about the care, health, and safety of each other. We must continue that, but I wanted to take the time, much as my colleagues have done, and congratulate you and thank you as well. I'll be very brief because I do want to allow plenty of time for Q&A. And so a lot of what I want to talk about is just a little bit about our protocol. We continue to examine and refine. And again, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Mike spoke about our Student Wellness Center, they are doing an extraordinary job. I always talk about COVID as an added layer to our work and an added layer of concern for all of us. So most recently, we determined that we could assist our Student Wellness Center by providing support in contact tracing. We contacted with those staff members who are involved with cross country to train with Johns Hopkins and become our dedicated contact tracers. They work directly with the Student Wellness Center. They work with our quarantine and isolation team. But this allows our Student Wellness Center really to spend additional time in the center and be available to students as they need beyond testing. We are also, significantly proud of our rapid and phased closure report. It is our guidebook. We know that there might be multiple possibilities where we need to mitigate any contagious event and outbreak. And so there are multiple ways in which we could contain the campus prior to a full closure. This 20-page report is just a guidebook for our college on how we might react and respond to any of these situations. And should we need to send students home, we're able to do that, we hope, within 72 hours, which is critical. We're working on November closure. You have some information on November closure. We'll continue to send out more. It's important to know that residential operations will close. Final exams will be conducted remotely. Students will receive a scheduled departure plan in the coming days. They'll be expected to pack all their belongings. And those who are unable to do that or can't do that will provide options for that student to make plans to have their belongings packed or shipped. We are looking forward to JTerm and planning for those students who may live on off-campus housing. We are spending significant time thinking about spring planning. I know that there are lots of questions around what will happen in the spring. Please know that not only Port, our senior staff, but numerous colleagues across campus are thinking diligently about what will happen in the spring. So for more on that, I'd like to turn it back to President Altman, who will close out remarks and then open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Donna. I think what I'd like to do is go to questions now, and then I'll make some closing comments at the very end. How's that?
That sounds great. Kelsey Lee could help us out.
Okay, so hopefully many of your questions have already been answered by everyone's remarks today, but obviously there are some questions that we have here from your submissions that haven't yet been answered. So I'm going to go through those and propose as many as I can to our panelists in the remaining time, and of course leave some time for President Altman to offer some closing remarks. If you'd like to propose an additional question after having heard everyone speak, we do invite you to submit that question now to the form which we have in the chat. So I'd like to begin with a relatively easy question, which would be for Vice President Caniglia. Why is the risk level indicated as moderate when we have 0 cases on campus? If you could speak to that regarding our COVID-19 dashboard.
Thank you very much, Kelsey Lee. The risk level is a function not just of what is happening on campus, but what is happening in the surrounding area, regionally as well as nationally. There remained growing levels of COVID-19 in the Lancaster region, and therefore moderate is appropriate. To downgrade it from moderate to the least likely level would indicate that we have basically gotten through the pandemic, and that is clearly not what the situation is.
Thank you. As a follow-up question to your remarks, Donna, there's a question regarding whether juniors and seniors or others who are on campus who know that they will be returning in the spring, why is it that they have to also move out all of their belongings?
So we are asking all students who live in residential housing to move out so we can, one, do a very deep cleaning of those spaces, but all that we're also, because we're going to curtail campus services. So we want to make sure that all students who are in residence off campus are aware of that, but especially that we are not caring for students on campus when we are not able to do so. I would ask Deb Moriarty if she would like to add anything to that.
No, I think that was covered the question.
Great. There's also a question here about JTerm. So Professor Rouser, when students sign up for JTerm, are they allowed to remain on campus during that time? And is JTerm part of the fall semester or the spring semester?
That seems like a philosophical question. I don't know. I think it's in between. I don't think it belongs to either one. Are you able to stay on the campus? No, the JTerm is completely remote. So everything in the JTerm will be a completely remote class, but hopefully a great experience.
Great, thank you. President Allman, you already covered the topic of the fact that our spring decision isn't necessarily finalized, it's still in flux. But can you speak to who is involved in the decision-making process for these sorts of major decisions? And as we're thinking about it, are we thinking about the timeline in terms of when we would anticipate announcing any changes to the current plan?
Yes, I'm happy to speak to that further. It is ultimately my decision in consultation with our senior team, but also in consultation with our consultants, Dr. Rich Keeling and his team of associates. And of course, we always keep the Board of Trustees informed and look for their input as well. So this is a decision that we consider from the logistical point of view, from the academic point of view, from the public health point of view, and from the point of view of the well-being of both our students and of all of our employees. We have a lot of different constituencies whom we need to take into account when we make that kind of decision. We're also, I'll say it again, the reason that we have done so well is because dedensifying turned out to be the right solution, as painful as it was for the sophomores this term, and as painful as it may be for the first years in the spring. But it is a decision on which I consult with all of my senior leadership team and then the experts we've brought on to help us make that decision. As for timeline, you know, this is tough because everybody needs to know as soon as possible. And yet as soon as possible sometimes means waiting to hear what the contextual factors are before we make a decision to change the plan. As Vice President Caniglia said, the reason that risk is moderate is because a lot depends not just on us and what our community is doing and how successful we have been, but on what's going on in the world around us, what kind of availability we have for testing, whether testing protocols have changed, whether there's anything new available to us, how many of our employees are working on site and are working off site. There are just myriad factors here that enter into the equation. So I know that there is haste and I know that there is impatience, and I feel that if I were in your position, I would be feeling anxious and frustrated and a little impatient too. But please know that so far our decision-making and our deliberative process has worked well, and we will continue to make very careful decisions based on all of the data available and as much good guessing as we can put in place about what's coming down the pipe for next year. And then we will let you know at the earliest possible opportunity. That's the best I can promise now, but we'll see to it that you'll have updates every time there's something definite to announce.
Thank you. Speaking of a desire for haste and understandable impatience, can you speak at all to the class of 2021 and our thoughts on their commencement?
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, yes, I can certainly speak to it, but without giving you a definitive answer. As you know, we have yet to do the appropriate send-off for the class of 20. We did a wonderful full week of appreciation for the graduates of 2020, but we are not yet entirely sure when we're going to celebrate them. Please know that that is the topic of a great deal of conversation as well. We really want to send you off in style and to acknowledge what an incredible finish you've had over your senior year and the end of the spring of your junior year. You and your generation and your year in particular are marked by this, you seniors and you juniors, and we hold in high esteem your ability to show that persistence and grit and agility that we hope to instill in every F&M student. We will do a celebration for you and we'll do it in style. We just don't quite know what it's going to look like yet. I think it's fair to say that we will hold to the date that's on the calendar for May. So whatever it is, it should take place on the appointed day or very near there in May of 2021. So you're often in our thoughts and we want to make sure that we celebrate you in style.
Thank you. There are a few questions about the student experience. So Dean Moriarty, could you speak to how we are prioritizing student engagement for our remote learners? And then also for those who are on campus, how we are trying to make them feel connected even through physical distancing and the gathering restrictions. And as the weather gets colder, what new measures have we put in place to enable students to still form those connections?
Great questions. I would say that because the vast majority of our engagement opportunities are online, that they pertain both to students who are here physically and students who are remote. So if you're reading your email, you get the same hundreds of student focused emails every day telling you what's going on. So hopefully you're taking advantage of that. Again, we were pretty intentional with programming for our second year students, just by circumstances of them having to leave campus and not having the first semester here. So we would be doing the same with first year students. We rely a lot on our student leaders, the house leaders. The student house leaders have been phenomenal in planning programs every weekend and during the week. The Dons are really good at doing that. Again, some are in person and we're doing that with great care about social distancing. In fact, we're doing a senior bonfire celebration. I think that email just went out today or yesterday. And I think it's the 31st of October. And, I think even the president was asking me, how are we going to do social distancing with that? So we have a plan in place to ensure that we're continuing to follow our COVID protocols in all of those kind of programs. A lot of the programs come up organically through the students. We do have a couple of tents set up on campus that can house bigger activities, and they have been utilized. There's some talk about putting some heating devices in there for when the weather gets a little bit colder. I think some of that will depend on the demand because there are just such restrictions on how many people can actually gather in one place at once. I hope that gives you enough perspective on all the things that are happening.
I think so. Donna, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on the tent. We are happy to announce one of the tents was a little bit less used than others. And so with the cost savings on that tent, we are happily, we'll be able to put some heaters on the Hartman Green tents. They seem to be used by students continually. So keeping students outside, safe, warm, and apart is our goal. And so I think this will be a great plan through the end of November.
And as a follow-up question, can you speak to the mental health of our students? How are they doing? Are we seeing any increased visits to our different mental health coordinators?
When I've checked in with our counseling center, they're as busy as they always are. The fact that we have less students on campus, I think probably is indicative of that students are a little bit more stressed. I think certainly the module system is new and has been something that folks have had to adapt to, both students and the faculty. So I think the pace really caught some folks off base in the beginning. And so, we continue to, from a counseling perspective, send notifications out to students. But I would say that, like everywhere else in this country, this pandemic has certainly added additional stress to what is already a stressful experience for college students, which is studying, testing, and particularly for new students who are new to campus. I think we have great support systems in place. And we, between the house deans, our DIP Cares program, which is a referral program that folks that are on the DIP Cares team can help students navigate whatever particular challenges they're having, and the counseling center, which has open hours at least 2 times a day, so that students, if they are really feeling stressed, can call in and get a hold of somebody right away, and then set up regular appointments after that.
May I add to that, Vice President Moriarty? I've been really, really glad to see the numerous emails that the Counseling Center actually sends to all of our students, recognizing what they're likely to be feeling at a particular moment in certain circumstances, and actually guiding them. It's been very helpful for me, I have to say, to read their pointers for how we all live through this time of very, very acute stress and a whole upheaval in our daily routines. So not only is the Counseling Center open and available with drop-in times for our students, they're also proactively giving advice and recognizing and mapping the emotional journey that all of our students are going through right now. We've had a very proactive approach to that, and I've been grateful to the Counseling Center for really getting out there and recognizing what people are feeling, even if they haven't yet found the words to express it.
Very true. We also have some questions about housing assignments, specifically for sophomores who we know are definitely returning in the spring. Will they be assigned to the housing they secured through the lottery, or are we anticipating having to put them all in singles? Will doubles be available? So if we could just speak to what we're thinking currently about housing.
Sure. And actually a survey will be going out in the next week or two, just asking students what their intentions are in terms of coming back to campus. Everybody will be in a single. We're not doubling folks up, and that's part of our pandemic plan that has enabled us to be successful in that. So I would say that students are going to have a chance to tell us whether they're coming back to live on campus, living in campus approved housing, or studying remotely. And from that will generate an opportunity to then tell us housing preferences. Certainly the Dons would like students to continue to be living in the house that they started in, and we're sort of negotiating that in terms of what students might also be interested in seeing in terms of housing assignments.
Thank you. We have a question about Dedensifying. If we do move forward with that plan of having the first years study remotely in the fall, do we anticipate offering any exceptions, such as for those who deferred in the fall and thought they were going to come back in the spring, or for athletes if we move forward with spring athletics, or for example, musicians who want to just attend their practices on campus? And if not, how would those students apply for a waiver to come to campus?
I'll answer that one, Vice President Moriarty, and you can jump in if you'd like. I will jump in to say that is exactly what we're talking about right now. So we need to work that out. We're not sure. We need to survey the students and make sure, first of all, that we know who all is planning to come back, so that we can calculate how many rooms we can have available safely, maintain the appropriate ratios, make sure everybody continues to be in singles. So once we have a better sense of who is committing to coming back for modules 3 and 4, we'll have a better sense of what our capacity is. But we're already discussing by what criteria we might be able to allow a few more back, and that will remain to be determined. Vice President Moriarty, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think the only thing that I would add to it is in terms of student athletes in particular, because I know there's been a lot of email in about that, is we're really looking at the NCAA, our particular conference, and our own campus needs in relation to how we might safely return to competition. And so there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall before any decision is made about that. Our athletic director, Lauren Pecker-Webster, is fantastic. She was on a call, I think just yesterday with the conference, and I believe that the president will be in a call the first week of November. And that is supposed to be the start of making some decisions about whether or not it's safe. 3 D3 conferences have already canceled competition for the spring. And so I think we're trying to wait as long as we can to make a decision for our conference in the hope that we can continue some competition.
I'd like to build on that. First of all, our teams, our coaches, our athletic department in general is much more active in keeping their teams practicing together, training together, anchored as a group than most of the other Centennial Conference schools. I know that through our AD and through discussion with other presidents. We've been much more active in athletics than most of our sister schools in the Centennial Conference. Most of the Centennial schools, I think perhaps all of them, had to de-densify, and so nobody has all their team members present. We're also generally among the most pro-athletic schools in the conference, and that is always the line I take, given that safety is the first priority. So as President Moriarty said, these are decisions that will be coming soon, but you can't do intercollegiate competition unless there are other schools to compete against. So this is not something that we can decide unilaterally. This is something that truly does depend on what the conference decides to do. So once again, as things roll out, I do feel for you and your desire to know, but we can't get ahead of the rest of the conference. We need to make sure that we're working with our sister schools on this one.
Thank you. Given the time, I do want to allow President Allman to offer a few closing remarks. If we didn't get to your question, please know that we are saving all of these questions. We will be reviewing them throughout our planning. If you would like to submit more, please go ahead and do so. And as I said, we'll make sure that all of the members of PORT are considering it in our planning. Go ahead, President Allman.
Yeah, thank you. I'll make sure that we finish just about on time because I don't want to presume on your evening. So I do want to say again that the presence of PORT members here on this call, our pandemic operations response team, is very significant. These are the folks who are in charge of monitoring every single day and often many nights what's actually happening, and then making sure that I and the rest of the senior team are aware of what's going on. This is a 24/7 job. There's not a single weekend when there haven't been at least half a dozen of us working around the clock to make sure that we have everything under control and are prepared for the next round. So this is truly a labor of love, and we are doing it round the clock. So thank you to the PORT members because they are doing their job awfully well. We're going to have to shift a little membership there so that some of those people can get back to their regular jobs between now and the spring. But we will have a PORT group seeing us to safe harbor, to that safe port in spring as well. So I'm really grateful to all the colleagues who are picking up such a lot of work, including those who are on the call today. I want to recognize juniors and seniors. We spend a lot of time talking about just how terrific the first year class has been and talking about what the sophomores can expect when they come back. I want to recognize the juniors and seniors too. What a heck of a way to get to your junior and senior year of your 4 years of college. And yet, you are rising to the occasion really remarkably well. The work that I've seen going on in the class presentations I attended at the end of Module 1, the work that is coming out for the research fair that will be part of True Blue Weekend, all of that work is still happening. And from what I've seen, there's still a lot of fun and a lot of activities going on as well. I witnessed, attended a remarkable dance performance held in a field behind the Armstrong plant a couple of weeks ago, with everyone spaced widely apart and the audience spaced along a sidewalk, watching as the sunset lit up the background of these incredible dancers. So we're soon having a play that will be taking place in person on the entranceway to the new Winter Visual Arts Center that will be live streaming and which some people will be able to watch from inside the interior. We are finding ways of using the spaces well, very creatively, and then making sure that it's always available to those of you who are off-site too. I want to make one last comment, which may sound a little cryptic, but I want to make this clear. Vice President Moriarty and Dean of Student Affairs Moriarty mentioned that we had some conduct issues the very first weekend of Module 1. There have been some other conduct issues along the way, as there are every year, even when we're not in a pandemic. But I want to remind you that the results of conduct hearings are confidential for the protection of the students involved, and because that's the way we do business. We are not going to air other people's processes. So you can be sure that there is much going on that you are not party to that allows us to remind people of their obligations, what they've promised to do, and to make sure that the atmosphere on campus is one of mutual respect and mutual support for all the ways we're having to operate in the day-to-day right now. That may answer a question or two that you are thinking, even if you didn't send it in. So beyond that, I just want to say that for the most part, what we've done this fall has worked really well, and we have adjusted it to make it work ever better as we go through our weeks of Module 1 and then Module 2. The result is that Modules 3 and 4 are likely to look much the same because we have found the right methods of delivering education, of working, and of keeping people safe in residence and in college-approved off-campus housing. So we hope for much continuity from this part of the year to the next part of the year. But as I opened with, we will continue to modify as we feel best and as we can do for the best of the student body, all of our faculty, all of our professional staff, and keeping in mind our responsibility to the community of Lancaster. We want to continue to be the exception. We want to continue to be one of the schools that made it despite all the dire predictions. So far, so great. And that's going to be the way we want to keep it up. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being with us. And as Kelsey Lee said, please keep sending us your questions and we'll keep answering. Thank you and have a good evening. See you soon.